And then all of a sudden my phone flashes and it's Las Vegas FSDO. So I was out in Kingman, Arizona with my Cessna 150. I was wrapping up a 6-month stint that I spent out there doing radial engine overhaul. I didn't have my IA yet, but my airplane was coming up on its annual inspection. And I was out of town. I was already out of town, but I was out of town of being out of town. So I was gone and my lease was ending at my place. So I came back in town and I picked up a ferry permit and I had to wait till Monday morning till the FSDO opened. I called the Las Vegas FSDO, submitted everything. I had already done the inspection, did my logbook entry. I was waiting for that ferry permit to hit my inbox. So it was about midday on the day that I left Kingman, Arizona in the 150 to head back to Louisville, Kentucky, my home base, after the 6-month work period. And I'm waiting on the ramp, the plane's packed, I'm fueled, everything, and I have this ferry permit hit my inbox, and I am like already on the primer, the throttle, the starter, everything. And I am climbing out, saying goodbye to this sweet little town, and the boneyard and everything is starting to disappear behind me. I'm coming up to the Wallapai Mountains. It was like a really sweet moment, and then all of a sudden my phone flashes, and it's the Las Vegas FSDO. And I didn't answer. I'm flying. And I was like, oh crap, well, if something was wrong, I just took off in an unairworthy airplane, and now thanks to ADSB, they can see everything. And he's, of course, been on my tail number all day. So the iPhone translated, and he just said, I just wanted to make sure that you got your... oh, I see you're already airborne. All right, have a safe flight. So he saw that I took off literally within a few minutes of getting my ferry permit. So along this cross country, I had many challenges. And although I had already flown the plane from Louisville, Kentucky to Kingman, Arizona, the route back was presenting new challenges for me. So my original route out west was the southern route. So I went south through Albuquerque area, and it's almost green on the sectional that whole flight. You don't really get into the higher elevation. You don't start dealing with those mountainous terrain issues. Where are you going to go if you lose the one and only engine that you have on the front of your airplane keeping you alive? So I was really nervous actually for this flight back. And at first I almost didn't even want to do it solo, because I was like, what if I make the wrong decision? I've never flown a pass through the Rocky Mountains. I was really using all of my resources to call friends, people that I knew that had flown, reaching out to friends of friends. Have you flown this pass? What is it like? Do you think, I crunched all the numbers 3 times over, and the plane, with margin, healthy margins, said it could do it. And I just briefed, what's my plan? And I was probably overthinking it quite a bit, but one of my biggest concerns is actually something that ended up biting me, but not too bad, thankfully, and that was density altitude. And it's something that you hear about during all of your training, but you really, really cannot understand the way it affects your engine, your propeller, your airframe, the lift on all components, and that once it's all added together, the performance toll you take on already what is considered an underpowered pattern trainer of an airplane with the O200 engine. It's pumping 100 horsepower out of the factory on a perfect day, perfect condition if you're lucky. Here I am, I'm leaving Kingman, Arizona, and my first stop was St. John's, Arizona. Beautiful flight. I flew right over the Sedona airport on my way there. Said goodbye to the Red Rocks, and it was a really good day. But because I had waited until later in the afternoon for that ferry permit to hit my inbox, I was kind of coming in there later, but my ultimate goal was to be able to make the pass on that first day. My planned route was Kingman, Arizona, St. John's, Arizona, and then across to just the east side of Albuquerque. And I knew if I could make it there, it was downhill from there. So like I said, we've all heard density altitude, like it is freaking serious, but I found out just how serious that afternoon. So I landed at St. John's. I was going to do a quick turn, refuel, and my rule is I don't land anywhere without an hour reserve, period. And that has been my rule since I got the plane. I still have the little, I don't have a fuel totalizer. I have a start-stop watch, and I always write down what my fuel was when I check it. So halfway through the flight, you're like, wait, was that this or this? Calculations with strong margins is my rule of thumb. So I land in St. John's, never been there before, top off with fuel, crunch numbers again because they have a banner posted at this airport. I think the airport is at 5,000 or 6,000 feet. And density altitude is a huge, they have it like a scoreboard there because it's so serious. And I have a photo of it, and I'd have to go back. I think density altitude was around 8,000 that afternoon. I had exactly the right amount of daylight to make the pass to get to my next stop, and exactly the right amount of fuel to make it there with an hour reserve. And this is the part of the trip that I was nervous, that I was reaching out to everyone about, and so I was heightened, and crunch numbers took off. And when I took off and I experienced density altitude that afternoon, I have never felt more uncomfortable in an airplane. There was no performance. I was not climbing. In fact, in certain parts while I was trying to circle and gain altitude, I was even sinking. I was like a freaking buzzard looking for dark spots on the ground to go and try to get those thermals. And I spent all like climbing out of that airport. There was a high school, and I remember looking out at the people's face. Like, I wasn't like treetop, but I was close. And I was like, holy cow, this is not, I was so uncomfortable. So I climb out. I go over an area that's darker, and I'm not getting altitude, and I only got up. I needed to make the pass at 11.5 was my goal, and I was still below the pass, and I spent an hour circling to gain altitude. An hour. So at that point, my fuel reserve just is gone. So I came back in and landed, and I had a tent. Because I'm doing this whole cross country, I don't know like where I'm going to end up, if I have an unplanned stop or if there aren't accommodations or whatever the situation may be. If you're going that far across the country in that slow of an airplane, it's going to be a few days at the minimum. So I go back to the airport, and at this point I'm like, I land and I'm pretty shaken up because I'm like, I've never felt that sinking feeling, quite literally, at full power. So I went over to pop my tent, and I get it out of the plane, and the airport manager drives over because I went to like the corner of the airport. Like, we're out west, it's the desert. So I'm getting ready to start setting up my tent, and the airport manager puts over, and he's like, "Excuse me, ma'am, what are you doing?" And I explained it, and he's like, "You can sleep in the FBO if you want. We have a couch, and I'll leave a car." So he left me his car and rode like his motorcycle dirt bike home so that I would have a vehicle. I went in town that evening. There was a Mexican restaurant, but next door there was a Mexican who was selling like fruit and vegetables, and I hadn't socialized with anyone, and I was like, I had just got back down on the ground feeling chatty, and I went over and talked to him, and he was like, "Well, are you going to get food at this restaurant?" I said, "Yeah." And he's like, "Well, I have fresh tamales." And I'm like, I don't have a microwave or anything. I'm staying at the airport. And he was like, "No, I mean, they're fresh. Like, and he pulled them out of the cooler. He's like, "They're still warm. My wife just made them." Best tamales I've ever had in Eastern Arizona and St. John's. And I spent that evening at the airport on the FBO couch eating warm tamales, fresh tamales, and I left at the crack of dawn the next morning, re-topped off with fuel. And making that pass was a huge accomplishment because originally I didn't even want to do that flight alone. But I think if I had another pilot with me, probably with more experience than I would have had, I would have leaned on them as, a crutch. I think we all call our pilot friends, what do you think about this situation? Am I looking at these? I still do. And I rely on my mentors and my flight instructors and stuff like that to help me understand, am I making those decisions correctly? But when I took off at sunrise the next morning, I was recapping that whole flight the night before. And I made the pass. I made it past Albuquerque to my next fuel stop. And for me, crossing the mountain felt like it was like climbing the mountain and then you're on the downhill. Like it was, like figuratively speaking, like a mountain climb for me. So as an aviator, as a pilot, the whole adventure and closing the journey, closing the chapter of being out west and kind of having that all behind me, it felt good on my way home to feel like, I had done all of that as safely as I could and learned some lessons along the way. And then, I was homebound.